Hello guys, and welcome back to another tutorial, and today we are back in our Minecraft series. We are in part 4. So in today's tutorial we will be creating our droppings. That sounds very bad, but we will be taking our blocks, and when we break the blocks we're going to drop an item, and in the next tutorial we'll be actually creating our inventory system. Now let's go ahead and get right into the tutorial. Okay, so for starters, we need to go ahead and do something. Currently, we're just debug.logging our block type. We're not actually dropping an item, right? And that's not very good. So how are we going to drop an item? Well, you may think, well, I'd need thousands of different block models and stuff to drop all the different types of blocks that are going to be put into the game later, and it's going to be all tedious and stuff like that. Well, yeah, you're kind of right, but for the blocks, it's actually simpler than that. For the blocks, all we need to do is create one basic model and just have different textures for that model. That way you don't have to create a bunch of models. And how are we going to do that? Well, we can create one model in Blender. Now, Blender is an open source software that I also do tutorials on this channel, and it's pretty awesome. I've been using it for a long time, so I know a fair bit about it. Now, one thing we will be doing is creating a large script in another script, of course, a large script that chooses each of the textures according to the block. Now, unfortunately, you may think, oh, well, we can do it better ways than that. Well, actually, that's the way Minecraft does it. There's a bunch of JSON files in a lot of them. Let's just say that. There's a lot of JSON files, and each are according to the block. So if it drops this, it's going to be that. If it drops this, it's going to be that. And then also it has the block states and stuff like that in separate JSON files. So there's loads of files for everything, but we're going to be simpling it a bit. Okay, so now that Blender's open, we can go ahead and create our block. Now, this block is actually perfect. This random cube right here. It's about a good size. It's perfect, right? This is what it is when you start Blender up. By the way, if you're just now trying to get good with Blender, I'll put a link to it in the description. Now, if you guys want to know fully how to do this, you're going to have to go and follow my other tutorials on my channel and see if you guys can learn. And also, if you want to, you can download this model in the description from Dropbox, okay? So I won't actually be teaching you guys how to do this because it's going to take a fair bit, and I don't want to take up too much time in this tutorial, so I'm going to be turning it into a time lapse. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have this model here, and actually you saw that time lapse from earlier. These are our drop models, so the models that are going to drop when we delete our object or remove the block, right? So these are our objects here. We have textures for them, but we're not going to use them just yet because those textures are just basic templates. All right. So what do we do with these guys? Well, for starters, we need to actually get them to spawn in the world, right? So how do we do that? In Visual Studio, go ahead and open that up, and go to our remove block function here. Move block out right here. Okay, now in this function, we need to do something right here. So this debug.log block type, I mean, it works for now. We'll keep it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to first create an object called, we'll call it block drop. So we'll say game object block drop. There we go. Then we need to say mono behavior dot instantiate, and we'll also do this real quick. We'll say block drop equals, and we'll say instantiate. There we go. This is our basic script right here. And we need to go ahead and create all of this stuff in here. So we don't have a prefab right now. So what are we going to do? We're going to say resource.load. Resources.load, sorry. And that's basically loading it from our assets folder or from a resource folder that we will create in a minute. So resources.load in our object is called drop object or drop. I think it's drop object. Let's go check real quick. Drop models, sorry. Drop models. Draw models. There we go. And that's good. And they'll have a type of game object. There we go. Then we're going to do exit out of that real quick. There we go. And for our vector 3 position that we're going to spawn in, we need to get hitPoint.x. Well, actually, we need to do a new vector 3. HitPoint.x. Hitpoint.y and hitpoint.z. Now this is just spawning them in right now. It's not doing much else. Then the last thing we need to do is the rotation. And that is quaternion, dot identity. And we'll say at the end of this little function here as game object. There we go. The end of our line. There we go. Save that, and it should spawn in the world now. Alright, so go into Unity, and if you press play, it would spawn in the world as you broke the object. So let's go ahead and press play. Before you play this, take your drop models and put them into a new folder called Resources. Now you can play. Alright, now that it's played, we can go ahead and press escape, delete a block, and it's spawned in. There we go. But it spawned in super duper high up in the air. Now we'll fix that in a minute. So let's go ahead and unplug him. So it spawned in, but it didn't really. It just spawned in. It doesn't do anything. It's just an object, right? So how are we going to change that? It's also two objects. So how do we change that? Well, go ahead and create a prefab here. We're going to call this drop. Put it back in the resource folder. And now we can name this drop instead as a prefab this time. Go back to Unity. Alright, and if you want, you can just drag that into Minecraft textures or something like that, because it's not really needed. Alright, now, first thing we need to do is create a script on this guy. We'll call this script drop models. No space. Create and add. Open that up in Visual Studio really quickly, and we'll add a couple of functions and variables to this guy. Alright, so what do we need to do? Well, let's do this. Alright, so you can go ahead and delete all of the functions in here really quickly and create one function, public void, and we'll call this function drop. Okay, that's that. Now this is going to be a very simple script. It'd be a little bit long, but it'll be really simple, just doing a couple of different things for the model. Now, public void drop, what do we need? Well, we need a position, so vector 3 position. And we'll also do this. We'll say block type, and that's it for now. There we go. So now we can do this. We'll say if type is equal to block type equals, block type dot grass, or block type, we'll do this, does not equal block type dot topsoil, or type, not comma, soil, or type does not equal, and you can go on forever like that. But right now, we only have one texture that has a a different type of texture. So one on the top, one on the side, and all that stuff. We only have one texture. Actually, there's a log, so, or type does equal block type dot log. Now those are our two textures that have different textures on the top and on the sides, so they're not all the same. So those are our only textures that are like that. But elsewhere, that's what we do. So that's our first basic thing. So if it is, then we're going to destroy this.transform.child get child, and we're going to get one child 1 or child 2. Now, let's look at this really quickly. So cube 1 and cube 2. So cube 1 would be the cube that is separate, and cube 2 would be the one that is full. So child 0 is separate, and child 1 is the full one. So child 0 is separate, so we're going to do that. So if it's the one that's separate, then destroy the other one. So if it's separate, if it's a topsoil, if it's a log, then it's not going to be a full texture for every side or in every top, a bottom, and stuff like that. It's going to be different. So destroy the one that is like that. And else destroy the one that has different textures on each of the sides. Now that's that. Now, next up, we need to move this. Alright, so to move this, we can go out of this if. We can say this dot transform dot position is equal to position. There we go. That's our position. Alright. And then we're going to do this. This dot transform dot get child 0 transform dot position equals this dot transform dot position. There we go. And that's our basic script. Save that, and we can go over to our world script over here, and we need to call that. So we can do that by doing this. We'll do block drop dot game object dot get component, and we're going to get the component of drop models, and we'll say dot, and we need to call that script, or that function, sorry, dot drop, and there we go. So we're going to drop what? Well, for starters, we have our vector3 position, which is pretty simple. All we need to do is new vector3 hit point dot x, and we'll change this later. This is just for now, it doesn't matter. We just want to see what happens. We'll change the position of it later, because right now it's probably going to still spawn in the air. So next up, we need a block type, and that's pretty simple. All that is block.type, and that is that. Sorry for your noise in the background, and that's that. So pretty simple right there. Now in Unity, if we play this and we delete a block, that should be pretty simple. Let's apply that. Should be pretty nice and easy. Let's go ahead and play it. Oh, and there's an error. Okay, that's pretty simple. Drop models need to be saved. There we go. And that should clear all of the errors. There we go. Nice. Alright, so now you can press play and see what happens. Alright, so the world is spawning in very quickly here. As you can see, there's an error for here that's been there for a long time. That's just because of the lava texture that we have. So it really doesn't matter. We don't need to set that because it doesn't matter to the game, because lava is not implemented into the game yet. So you may have been wondering about that. Again, doesn't matter. Alright, so now we can break a block. And transform component of full. If you want to destroy the game object, please call destroying the game object instead. Destroying the transform component is not allowed. Alright. So it's pretty... Can't destroy the transform component of full. That's pretty easy to fix. all we need to do is go to that script, the drop model script, and when we destroy this dot transform dot get child dot game object. Here we go. Okay, so next up, we need to actually give our block a texture. It's spawning in. Now, it's actually spawning in the air, but that's okay. But it's at least spawning in, so we need to at least give it a texture and kind of set up what it's going to look like. Now, we are going to be creating a function that allows us to set each and every texture for every model. Now, it'll be a long list eventually when you have loads of block models, and if you want to, you can even change it up a bit. So, how are we going to do this? We're going to go ahead and create a function, and we're going to call it public void. We'll call it awake item. And we're going to, in here, we're going to say block type. So block type. There we go. And then we are going to, under that, we will say if, so now we're going to get to the part where we're setting each and every texture for every object. So for example, if type is equal to block type dot stone, then we are going to do something in here. Alright, so let's go ahead and call this function, and then we will add some more stuff into there, and we'll just say type. There we go. Okay, so right here, what do we need to put? So like under the if type equals block stone, what do we need to do? Well, we need to do this. We need to add a texture to our item. So we need to say this dot game object. Well, we'll do this dot transform. This dot transform dot get child, and we're gonna get the child of 1. Now you may be thinking, well, why? That's kind of weird. Well, why do we get the first child? No. Because you may think, well, we're destroying one child, so we're only going to have one child under that parent. We're going to have one child under the parent because we're deleting one of them, right? Now, there's a couple of reasons why that's not true. First off, we're calling it above when we're destroying it. Second off, this, for some reason, if we even put it at the bottom, or if we put it right under here, I've done it before, then no matter what, it's going to act as if there's still two childs, even though there's only one. So you need to say, if we're going to be doing the topsoil or the log, then we need to be saying get child 0. But if we're not getting that, then we need to say get child 1 as for the full blocks. Now, we need to change this function name to awake item full. So for the full object, we need to copy this and paste it as formatting pasted text. That's not right. Awake item separate, right? Or different textures on each side. Now, that's that. So we have 2 functions for this. Now, in here, we're going to call awake item full under this destroy and awake item separate under the other one. There we go. Now that's that. Now we need to change this code, but we're going to go ahead and finish our get child here. So we're going to get the child, and we're going to get the game object. We're going to get the component of render. Then we're going to get that material, so the render material. Then we're going to get the main texture, and we're going to set it equal to a new texture. Now, what is that new texture? Well, we need to do this really quickly. We need to create a new list, public list. We're going to call this list full blocks or blocks, whichever one, doesn't really matter. So public list, and this list will consist of texture 2Ds. There we go. Set it equal to new list texture 2D, and there we go. Now we're going to use that over here, so blocks and stone will be 0. There we go. And over here it's practically the same thing. But instead, we're going to name this log, and we're going to change the getChild to 0. getChild 0. And one more thing, we need to duplicate, copy that list, paste it in blocks separate. There we go. And do that over here, separate. There we go. And the log will be 0, and the grass will be 1. Let's wait for this for just a second. And the grass, so it's topsoil, will be 1. There we go. Over here, we can copy this, paste it a couple of times, and do all of the blocks. So we have dirt. And what's another block that we have? We have leaves, but currently we don't want the leaves to drop. We'll set the leaves up, but we don't want them to drop. So we'll set this to leaves. There we go, and we'll say 1 and 2 here, but we don't actually want them to drop. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do this. We're going to say if, let's do this, if type is equal to block type dot leaves, then destroy this dot game object. Here we go. And that's that. Now, that's our leaves. You can comment that out if you want to, but you don't have to. Now, another thing we can do is just change this to player. That way, it's to the player. And currently, if we play this, the item will be far off. So it's going to be farther off than the actual empty, which is unfortunate. So in Unity, we can go ahead and change that by pulling our prefab in. Our drop models prefab here, which is in resources. Drop. And we're going to pull them both to the empty game object. So full is way over here, so we can just pull them into the empty game object right there. There we go. And that's our drop. Now, right now, if we play this, it'll actually turn out pretty good. Now, as you can see, I've already set it up. We can go ahead and set it up for leaves here. Wait for it to finish loading here. Alright, so we'll set this to 3. Under textures, leaves goes to 3. And block separate, size equals to 2. And we also have a maple log that's correct. So we can set those up too. We can go ahead and do that in a minute. So these textures, unfortunately, for right now, it won't work very well. It's because we need a separate type of texture for the separate one. And I'll show you guys how to do that in another tutorial. You can go ahead and press play, I think. And if you guys want, you can go ahead and give these a rigid body and a mesh collider. But the physics material, we'll just set it to be like ice or something. Doesn't really need to be anything interesting. Rubber, wood, anything like that. Doesn't matter. And the layer can be under another layer called items. There we go. And that's our layer. There we go. And probably be better to add a box collider for this. Save it. So before you play, you need to make sure your first-person controller is tagged as player. Alright, we started playing once again. Let's go ahead and break a block here. And something just happened. Okay, as you can see, an object dropped. Now, it kind of pushes us out of the way because it's in a different layer and stuff. Woo! But as you can see, the texture works and it drops the item. Now, all we need to do is set it to be able to not collide with the player. So, whoop, as you can see, stone. So I broke stone and I get stone. I break log and I get log. I break grass and I get grass. And leaves, let's make sure I don't get the leaves. No, I don't get the leaves. So as you can see, I can break the leaves without getting them, which is just what we want. Now, how do we make it so that I don't get pushed around by the dropped object? And to do that, we need to do something very simply. Go into the Edit tab up here. Edit. Project Settings. Physics. Now in here you can see that we have our items and items right here. So we do not want items to interact with items. So we don't want the items to interact with default. Right? So default should not interact with items, but items should interact with everything else. So this guy should be default, layer default, perfect. And everything else should be in another layer here. Let's go ahead and check our chunk prefab. That's okay. We'll do this. We'll take our first person controller, our layer, we'll add a layer, and we'll call this player. Go ahead and go back into your project settings, physics, and we'll disable it for player. So items should not interact with player. So we have player here, and that should not interact with items. As you can see, player does not interact with items. There we go. Awesome. Alright, so it's finished playing, and as you can see, our physics tab, or under our physics, our layer here, our player is player, the layer player, and our drop is, the drop of the rigid body at least, is items. So now we can walk through this. We can even break more items here. And as you can see, we can walk through them just fine. And they're affected by the rigid body. Awesome. As you can see, it works perfectly. Now, currently we can't pick up these items, but that's for the next tutorial. There we go. So that's it for this tutorial, guys. Thank you for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.